This is The Guardian.
Hello, I'm Faye Carruthers and welcome to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly. So the opening weekend of the Barclays WSL did not disappoint with dream debuts and some glorious goals. There were some stuttering starts as well, but not for Arsenal's Olivia Smith, who showed she's well worth the money. Chelsea started where they left off, laying down a marker against Manchester City. United made light work of Leicester, and Everton sparkled in the Merseyside derby. We're going to cast our eye over the deadline day drama, plus we'll take your questions. And that's today's Guardian Women's Football Weekly. What a panel we have today. Suzy Wrack, how has your week been?
Busy, really busy. Lots of big interviews coming out ahead of the new season, then dovetailed with the transfer window. So, that was exhausting.
Anything that you can kind of tease us for the week?
This week, I'm talking about last week, we had Germa, Bunny Shaw, Beth Mead, Georgia Stanway, all as big interviews. This week, I've got a really nice Afghanistan piece coming out.
Wonderful. I look forward to reading that. Tim Stillman, how are you? Happy with the Gunners' start to the season, no doubt?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yes, it all worked out all right in the end. The first 20 minutes or so, I was a little bit on edge, but yeah, good start for Arsenal. Looking forward to getting into it.
Wonderful. We have a pod debut as well. Fadumo Olow, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a good weekend of football as well. So I'm glad that the WSL's back. Even though the Euros was only a good month or two ago, it still feels like it's been forever.
Yeah, well, we didn't feel like that last week when we did our preview pod. We felt like it had been a nanosecond since we'd been talking about football. But I tell you what, it was a blockbuster weekend. Stamford Bridge to the Emirates, Anfield, and everything, of course, in between. The Barclays WSL felt like it was back with a bang. But we're going to kick off with arguably the action of the weekend. It was at the Emirates with the European champions welcoming league newcomers London City Lionesses. And as Tim alluded to just then, some early shaky moments for Arsenal, falling behind to a Kosovari Asllani penalty early on, but they did eventually find their attacking groove and put four past the visitors to make it a comfortable opening day victory in the end. Suzy, your team as well, it had the hallmarks, bearing in mind what London City Lionesses had been doing in the transfer window, spending big. They were kind of the unknowns, weren't they? And it could have been a little banana skin for Arsenal. Maybe that's what contributed to their slow start.
Yeah, I read that beforehand. I mean, every team is going to, find it a little bit difficult to settle into a new season and into the first match. The past couple of campaigns, Arsenal have had some pre-WSL start games in the Champions League and things that have sort of kind of got them ready almost to be able to hit the ground running in the league. So I think, those first 20 minutes of unconvincing play, few sloppy passes were sort of kind of inevitable. I think we saw most teams across the weekend struggle at some point with kind of settling into the campaign. But really great performance overall, great debut. London City, a banana skin for sure. In a way, it's quite good to play them in the first game of the season before they've had a chance to gel, because I actually think they're going to be a pretty decent side. I think Jocelyn Prashur is a very good manager and will get something out of those players. So, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they develop.
Yeah, we'll talk about London City Lionesses in a second. I'm not sure Tim fully agrees with you on how they're going to progress this season, but I do want to talk to you, Tim, about Olivia Smith, because there's a lot of pressure on a big price tag, isn't there? But the display that she put on, the goal that she scored, showed exactly why she's worth £1 million.
Yeah, I mean, the goal itself, if I was explaining to someone who'd never watched football, never watched the WSL, etc., why did Arsenal sign Olivia Smith? It's for that. It's because of her ability to create her own shots, her ability to come up with individual actions. And even before that, I think her first touch of the game, she kind of took the ball on both feet and did a little skill and drew a foul. And I think it's just that kind of sense of, really taking a moment, really taking a game by the scruff of the neck that maybe Arsenal just don't quite have enough of, particularly in a centre forward like Russo, who's I think elite at hold-up play. She creates 4 chances in this game, but perhaps she isn't a killer as a goal scorer. And so I think behind her, Arsenal need someone like that who really can just drive past three players and smash it in the top corner. And from there, Arsenal never really looked back. That was the moment the game swung, and it never swung back again after that.
That attacking depth is quite clear to see. Beth Mead, Frida Marnham and Stina Black-Stenius all coming off the bench for Fadumo. 2 assists for Beth Mead as well for the other 2. What did you make of the substitutions from Rennie Slegers?
No, I thought they were really good choices. I think particularly with Beth Mead, there's been lots of talk about, like, what's her career looking like at Arsenal? Where does she fit into this matrix so far? And I really think she showed great value and what she brings as a player coming off the bench, having 2 assists. And I think it's exactly what Arsenal needs throughout the season, being in so many competition. They need that kind of natural rotation that goes quite seamless and it doesn't really affect the play in a negative way. And I think Beth Mead really brings that to the side.
Good point. Okay, let's discuss London City Lionesses. They have spent a lot of money, but is it going to be difficult for Jocelyn Pashore to kind of make them into a cohesive unit? Ryan has sent us a message on X. What now for London City Lionesses? How do they improve ahead of their hosting of Manchester United on Sunday? Who wants to pick this? Suzy from the positive side or Tim from the slightly more negative side? Go for both.
I'll go first. It's a tough ask, right? Like, we've seen a lot of teams struggle with gelling players, particularly, like, I think back to when, say, Everton finished 4th or 5th and Aston Villa finished 4th or 5th, in a few seasons ago. Like, went through big transformations over the summer to try, like, with the ambition of breaking into that top 3 or 4. And both failed dramatically, and part of that was like the high turnover of players, where you disrupt the momentum you had the previous season in a very successful campaign by having to get rid of players, but you're trying to elevate the quality of the side to be able to compete with those top teams. So, like, disruption isn't always a good thing. So I think it's going to be really, really difficult. And they've got such a wide range of players coming in terms of, like, old heads, experience, but that will tire late on, like we saw against Arsenal, and then some really exciting young talent as well. So I think it's very much like a team for the future, but I do think in the context of the league as a whole, particularly amongst those mid-table teams, they're going to be very, very competitive.
Yeah, I think they'll be absolutely fine, because the bottom line is they have quality, and you can always work with that as a coach. It might be slightly rocky for the first few games. I think we saw that from them last season. They didn't fly out of the blocks in the second tier, but once they kind of got motoring a little bit, they were much, much better. I think you could see why they won, or why they bought Grace Guerrero, aside from the fact that she's a really, really good player, but they perhaps just missed a little bit of that power at the back of the team, at the back of the midfield. I thought Arsenal got hold of that area, but it reminds me a little bit of when Man United first came up in 2019 under Casey Stoney, and you could see the kind of the foundations were there. But it took them a season or two to really become a competitive team. I think we'll see something similar for LCL, but I don't think they'll be anywhere near relegation. I think they'll take points off of a Chelsea, a Man City, a Man United at some stage in the season, maybe just not quite now.
You're nodding, Fadumo?
Yeah, I think definitely. And you've also got to remember, they don't need to win a lot of games to stay up. You saw that with Crystal Palace last season and the seasons before that. And I think especially with the format changing for next season, they've just got to get those wins. And I do think they can do that, especially against some of the sides that, I anticipate will struggle a bit more throughout the season, like Leicester City. And we saw a Liverpool throughout that game against Everton as well. So I think they've probably been dealt a tough card for the opening 2 games of the season, be against Arsenal and Manchester United. But on the positive side, it's a good thing they get them out of the way. So it's one of those ones.
That is a good point. And to Suzy's point as well, the bigger teams get them out of the way as well before they start gelling and clicking. I'll tell you who didn't need very much time to gel and click. It was 20-year-old Ornella Vignola. What a debut to remember for Everton, scoring all 3 of her shots created in a 4-1 win over Liverpool in the Merseyside derby at Anfield. They've got such a good record there. I tell you what, Marva Creel is going to be gutted that she did the preview pod and not this week's pod as an Everton fan. She would be delighted. 4 straight victories it is now for Brian Sorensen's side. Came from behind as well. It's a happy stomping ground for them. 6 wins from 6 on Liverpool soil, which is just Absolutely incredible. What did you make of this game, Suzy?
I mean, it shows what a team can do when they're backed, right? And like when a decent manager is given a decent number of players to work with. And obviously the changes at Everton have meant that they've got the back in, they're at Goodison, like that's a pull for players as well that is a powerful one. And, you know, great to see some of their new signings come into the side and make a difference, because that's where they've really been struggling in recent years, like working on a complete and utter shoestring. Obviously Vignola's going to steal the headlines, but I thought Maz Pacheco in particular was absolutely brilliant. They've just got a really, really good squad now, and I'm quite excited to see what they do with it. It was not complete plain sailing for them. Liverpool arguably could have been 2 or 3 goals up fairly early on, but a real confident performance from the forwards, like starting ahead of Kelly Gago as well. I think a lot of people were surprised by that. Brian Sorensen said that she's been doing this a lot in training though, so yeah, clearly deserving of that starting spot ahead of the French player.
Yeah, she came in from Granada, didn't she, in the summer? One of 9 players brought in to Everton over the transfer window. And what a debut, Tim. First Everton player, male or female as well, to score a hat-trick against Liverpool since Dixie Dean back in 1931. That's about 90 years, by the way. My maths is telling me. I mean, what an incredible debut.
Yeah, absolutely exceptional. And I really rate what Everton have done over the summer. I think I read it's been 4 years since they finished above Liverpool, 3 years maybe since they finished above Liverpool in the WSL. I do fancy them to do that this year, actually, when I look at what both clubs have done during the summer. But a really, really fantastic debut. It has to be said, though, as much as I really rate Brian Sorensen, and I kind of tipped Everton to maybe push towards that 5th place this year, that there was an element of freakishness about this result. I think Liverpool hit the bar a couple of times. They very much outscored Everton on XG. Everton, I think 4 of their first 7 shots went in. And, you know, you could see with the hat-trick goal, for example, the big deflection, when it's your day, it's your day. However, I think, again, like I was saying about Olivia Smith, really, with Vignola, particularly 2 of those goals, she makes them out of nothing because she gets a shot off from, you know, not a great flowing move or anything, but she gets the ball, she gets it on her left foot, and she has a go. And if she keeps doing that, she might not get a hat-trick every single game, but it actually reminded me a little bit, I think, of the first game of last season. Brighton played Everton, and Sika got a hat-trick for Brighton, and it was very similar, where 2 of the goals were from quite long range. So maybe a little bit of payback for Everton there in terms of getting maybe a little bit of luck, but I really like what they've done this summer, and I think they've got a really good coach, and I think they'll cause a lot of teams a lot of problems this year.
The fearlessness of youth. It is quite incredible, isn't it? That they can just grab a game by the scruff of its neck. But you're right, a scoreline doesn't always tell the full story. And actually, Brian Sorensen did say, Fadumo, that they were quite poor in the first half and lucky to go in ahead. How did he manage to change the game in the second half?
A big part of it was just Liverpool were in some ways just really unlucky with some of their chances as well. And I think some of the substitutions he made really helped them as well. But again, looking away from Everton, but looking at Liverpool specifically, I do think that I'll be interested to see what this new Liverpool side is going to look like with Gareth Taylor. I mean, he's been in that Manchester City ecosystem for so long, and you can see him trying to implement some of those changes. But I worry for them because I don't think they necessarily have the players that can really implement what he wants, like playing out of the back. I think defensively they were quite poor as well in that game. So I don't know if his style of play is really going to suit this Liverpool side going forward. And the thing with the WSL, you don't really have the luxury of time. There's not a massive league with so many players. So I'm worried about that element for Liverpool going forward.
Well, he seems to have been told that he's been given time because he's talking about it in terms of it being a project. And, you know, as you would do in a new job, you know, very open about the fact it's the start of a project. That helps give you a little bit of time and favour with the fans as well, doesn't it? But do you think the fans should feel positive or concerned, Suzy? We discussed this last week a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be quite concerned about. The complete disinterest from the club as a whole towards the women's team this summer is evident in the transfer window, right? Like Sam Kerr, great recruitment. Lily Woodham, another great signing. But it's very, very piecemeal. And, you know, when you lose players of the quality of Olivia Smith and Taylor Hines and, Neve Fahey retires, Yana Daniels goes, like, you're not really replacing, like, sort of like for like quality. And yeah, I'm really worried about them. I think it's a really difficult task that Gareth Taylor's got ahead of him. And in many ways, I'm like really interested to see, because there's like, you know, such a huge test of his ability as a manager to be given a team with so few resource in comparison to his only job in a head coach role at Man City. It's like chalk and cheese. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he copes with that team and that standard of players and the level that they're fighting at, because obviously at City you can like input your style onto those players and get something from them, but it's how adaptable he is to getting the best out of the players at his disposal who may not be able to play the sort of free-flowing game that he would like to play, and I think that's the interesting thing for me.
Yeah, speaking of two teams with plenty of resources, his former team, Manchester City, beaten on the opening game against Chelsea. Tough game to start with, but Chelsea's title defence up and running. 2-1 they won in the end. It was a battle of the WSL heavyweights, and one that we questioned. Great start to the season, but almost too many big games to kick off the season. And it felt like they picked up where they left off, I think is what I mean. Tim, you knew what I meant, didn't you? Sonia Bonpastor is now unbeaten in the league in 23 games, which is quite incredible. What did you make of Chelsea's performance?
Yeah, I thought this was such an interesting game because both teams did some. We saw Chelsea at the end of last season move to that kind of back three on occasion. And I know Manchester City manager, is it Jeglerts?
Jeglerts, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I've never said his name out loud before. That's the first time. And he said he was caught by surprise a little bit by that. And obviously we're seeing Manchester City try and do some new things. They're moving to more of high press. In fact, they remind me of Arsenal when they moved from Joe Montemurro to Jonas Eidevall, gone to more of a double pivot in midfield. So they're doing quite new things. They have quite a lot of players missing. But the story of this game for me with Chelsea was the wing-backs, Ellie Carpenter, Sandy Baltimore. You know, Man City were trying to really clog up the middle, but those two wing-backs, I think, really, really kind of got stuck into Manchester City, particularly Ellie Carpenter. I think you look at both goals, Alex Greenwood, you know, you probably see why she's more of a centre-back nowadays. And I felt that Chelsea was smart there. And Sonia Bonpastor afterwards talked about that being tactically flexible, being unpredictable. And I think them catching City by surprise, that's the difference in this game. They just sprung a little bit of a surprise. It gave them a 2-goal lead. And that's won them the game, really.
The surprise, so much so that then Jeglerts decides to give his team a proper tactics board instruction manual, which Sonia Bonpastor was not happy about at all. He had started Lauren Hemp on the right. Carolyn and Fagino were both out, which maybe contributed to it. But getting out a tactics board during a break in play with Yamashita down receiving treatment, Sonia Bonpastor was not happy about that. She said she didn't feel like it was in the rules. What did you make of all of that, Fadumo?
I thought that was quite funny, actually. I'm not going to I mean, I feel like you've got to try your best to win a game one way or another, so I don't really blame him for it. But I do think, going back to that point on Hemp playing and Murphy playing on opposite sides, I don't think that worked for them at all. It kind of left Ellie Carpenter wide open to really dominate that wing completely. And it's insane what Chelsea do. Like, they bring in such like high value players of such insane quality, and you think almost like, is there going to be a sense of competition? Is the team going to, like, I guess, break apart in some type of way? But it never does. I don't know what it is Sonia Bonpastor does. I don't know how the Chelsea system works, but they're just really good at bringing in such high value players with such great quality that just naturally fit into a game and seem unbothered about the fact that they might be out over the next couple of weeks if another player comes in. It's the perfect system, and I think Manchester City really struggle with that. And I just generally think throughout the season, it'll be interesting to see if they can keep their players fit, because I think that's been a big part of Manchester City. I think I watched an interview where Vivian Miedemar said that she'd only played with Lauren Hemp and Bunny Shaw 3 times last season. So, yeah, injury is a big problem for them. But if they can keep their players fit, especially that attacking front, I do think they can get some good points and some good goals and really challenge at the top.
Yeah, it's not all over. It's the first game of the season.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's always been so tight, hasn't it? You look at that as a first game and you go, that's it. City are out of the running, but it's not going to be the case, I'm sure. And actually, Suzy, Fadumo mentions the stars that Chelsea have at their disposal. Alyssa Thompson announced to the Stamford Bridge crowd before the game. Sam Kerr named on the bench for the first time in 21 months after that awful injury she picked up. Aggie Beever-Jones obviously got the opening goal, made sure she wasn't forgotten. Myra Ramirez is due to come back. Lauren James is due to come back as well. How are they going to juggle their attacking stars?
No one's ever happy when you're sitting on the bench, right? But medals help big time. If they finish with trophies at the end of the season, then no one is going to particularly care like how they got them to a certain extent. And if you're in 4 competitions and competing in 4 competitions for much of the season, then you need that squad, right? Like there's the fact that so many of those players are either injured or coming back from injury shows that you need a deep squad to be able to manage. Aggie Beever-Jones really excited me. I thought she looked brilliant. You could say that in a squad with that much attacking talent, she's not going to get much game time, but I really think she deserves it, and I'd like to see her get it. But yeah, like exciting times. I think that there's a big contrast in the impact of getting your business done early between Arsenal and Chelsea in these opening fixtures, in that, obviously Alyssa Thompson sat in the stands because she's only just arrived on deadline day versus Olivia Smith having that incredible debut performance after a full pre-season at Arsenal, which is interesting. Obviously that only lasts for a short while a player settles in, but I think there is, some merit in that kind of early business that Chelsea are usually really, really good at. This was, I thought, quite a surprising move for them. Usually they've got their business done before the window's even open. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they settle.
Yeah, it is indeed. Settled quite well so far. Win over Manchester City. Right, that's it for part 1. In part 2, we're going to look at how some of the other teams got on. Welcome back to part 2 of the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Right, let's continue with the rest of the weekend's Barclays WSL action. Manchester United cruised to a dominant 4-0 win over Leicester in Lee on Sunday. It was an emotional day as well for Ella Toone. She actually scored the opening goal on 13 minutes, which happened to be on the anniversary of the death of her dad, Nick. Put in a player of the match performance as well. She was outstanding, Tim.
Yeah, she really was. And I think one of the things that Manchester United never quite sorted out was how to get Ella Toone and Grace Clinton into the same team, which I think might have played into, as well as the contract situation, why they were willing to let Grace Clinton go, because we saw Ella Toone on the right quite a bit last season, on the right of the front three, and I don't think that really worked. And then you see with this goal what she's all about, really, popping up kind of roughly around the penalty spot with a first-time finish. That's just Ella Toone all over. And when she's playing in that number 10 role, which really is her role, I think, that's when you get the quality. And it feels to me like maybe the Grace Clinton, like I said, the contract situation forced it. But I did think that United needed to make a decision between those two players. They've made it. And I don't blame them for making the decision they have, because I think Ella Toone is such a huge part of that team and has been for so many years now. And really great to see her back in her position and scoring goals again.
Yeah, it really felt as if Manchester United were a team that had, really benefited from having competitive Champions League football in the last few weeks rather than pre-season games for Fadumo.
Yeah, I think it gave them a bit of a time to kind of get into that competitive feel a lot quicker. But I also think this game really showcased, I think, a lot of players. Like Mallard, I think, was exceptional, and I'd love to see a lot more of her throughout the season. I think Jess Park, when she came on, was good. She works really well in tight spaces, and I think the trade, at first, I kind of side-eyed it. I think naturally, like a lot of Manchester United fans do, it's kind of like, why don't you want to keep your best player or one of your best players in your team? But I definitely agree with Tim. Like, if you can't fit them into that same system and the contract negotiations aren't going the way they are, it's better to cash in early. And I think United have been victims of that transfer saga before with Alessia Russo, with Mary Epps, and kind of sorting out early on works well in their favour. But yeah, as a side, I think they looked really good. I do worry for Manchester United injury-wise throughout the season. I think it's been a reoccurring theme as to why it just tops off at like second place. And I know Chelsea are just in a whole different atmosphere to the rest of the side at times, but you kind of saw it throughout the season last year when you do lose players at vital points of the season, especially when you're in so many competitions. It's just having such a small, I guess, lack of experience throughout the side isn't great. And that's the bit that I worry for Manchester United. But as an opener game, I thought it was great. Like Jade Riviera's cross was fantastic. And I think she's an exceptional player. But again, another one that's had quite a bit of injury. So I'm keeping everything crossed in hopes that we can have a good season. Not gonna lie.
Are you a Man United fan? I'd forgotten that.
A nervous one.
Yeah. Sorry, Tim.
I was just going to interject there and say, yeah, United only named 5 subs for this game. One of them an academy player, obviously one of them a goalkeeper. So you can see the squad. I know there's a couple of players to come back, but that's quite shallow, particularly when you compare what Arsenal and Chelsea did with their substitutions this weekend.
Yeah, look, we were going to talk about transfers a little bit more, but I'm calling it the Manchester Lioness switch. Jess Park and Grace Clinton, both crossing over different sides of the city. But Grace Clinton, Suzy, saying, essentially, I'm not on the same page as the club and leaving when she's been so superb. We saw what she did when she went out on loan to Tottenham. It's felt like she's not quite been on the same page as the club for quite a while, actually.
And she's not alone, right? Like, we've seen a lot of players leave Man United over the recent years and sort of say similar and, kind of hint at the state of the club behind the scenes. And there's clearly a disconnect there. We've spoken about Jim Ratcliffe's statements about the women's team at various points on the podcast fairly regularly, which don't speak to amazing kind of level of support for the women's setup. And yeah, I'm very worried about their lack of business. Obviously, Siglotti Olm, Rolfo and Jess Park are all really, really good quality additions, but that's not enough for a team that is potentially going to be competing in the Champions League this season as well, should they get through all of the qualifying games. So it's a big ask for their squad. And I think when you reflect on the last few seasons, I think they've been really, really lucky with injuries. They've not had a big injury crisis, 1 or 2 here or there, but none that have utterly derailed them. But they're literally 2 injuries away from a complete crisis at all times, and they're not being backed. And now they've got an potential extra load of games added in as well. I think it's going to be a real struggle, and I feel quite sorry for the staff around the club who are having to weather that. But yeah, I think it's telling that a lot of the statements from players exiting in recent years have been quite damning.
Yeah, and actually they play Bran on Thursday night in Champions League qualifying, and then they've got London City Lionesses at the weekend in the league. So, you're exactly right. They're a bit thin on the ground. Leicester, I think everybody pretty much tipped them to be the relegation contenders of the season. Rick Passmore took interim charge last week. They did add a few names on deadline day. It's early days, but is the manner of the defeat, Tim, concerning for Leicester?
Very. I'm very concerned about them. I tipped them for that relegation playoff spot myself. They only scored 21 goals last season, which was only 1 more than Crystal Palace, who are quite comfortably relegated. And I don't really think they fixed that in the transfer market, to be honest. What they stayed up on last year was their defensive record. I think they had the joint 6th best defensive record, so a mid-table. And that's what got them some draws here and there that really kept them out of the relegation picture. But if they're conceding 4 on the opening day, that's quite concerning. The whole manager situation, I find quite concerning to change like that with 11 days to go before the season. Not sure that was handled particularly well either. I think they're very clear favourites for that bottom spot, I have to say. Jutta Rantala coming back potentially boosts them in terms of goal scoring and overall quality, but it doesn't look like a squad to me. It doesn't really look like a WSL squad to me, I have to say.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how they get on and whether or not Rick Passmore gets the job permanently or not, or if there is another manager potentially waiting in the wings. One new manager, Martin Ho, got his first 3 points of the season. Spurs with a narrow 1-0 victory over West Ham in his first game in charge. Not necessarily convincing, I think it's fair to say, for Fadumo. Beth England's 86-minute penalty, their only shot on target in the game. Look, a win is a win. Good to open with it, but, work to do, I think.
Yeah, you're right. A win is definitely a win. I think With Spurs, bringing in Martin Ho was good for them. Like the Manchester United fan base, and I guess even having spoken to former players, they all speak so highly of him and said that he was a great contribution to the success that Manchester United were having. What I worry for them is in the lack of signings and also the ageing side that they have, especially in their starting 11. I think Beth England is great. Do I think she should be your go-to goal scorer week in, week out? I don't think so. And I think that stuff like that worries for me about Spurs going forward. But yeah, a win's a win. But I think, especially even with West Ham, they're not overly inspiring as a WSL side. It's really, I guess, tough to say, but they're just not that exciting to watch either. So I think they came across it, faced their equal really in that sense. I'll just be wondering what to see from them going forward throughout the season.
Yeah, they've got stuff to build on, I think is the diplomatic positive way of looking at it, just in case Chris Powros is listening and doesn't want us to be hammering her Spurs this early in the season. West Ham had so many opportunities, Suzy, 20 touches in Spurs box, but just the one shot on target, which will be quite frustrating, I'm sure, for Rhiannon Skinner going forward.
The thing about West Ham is, on paper, they've got like a good squad with good quality players. I feel like we say that every time we talk about them, but I am a little bit worried about them this season. They had 8 players go out, they only brought 4 in. Like the squad depth isn't there, although you would argue that the quality is there. They just never ever look like a team that can get any kind of consistency week in, week out. Like they manage to grab the shock result but can't then do it the following week in the easier tie almost. So I'm always on the fence about them. I was toying with them for the relegation spot, but no, the relegation playoff spot alongside Leicester. But I sort of always am with West Ham, and they always seem to sort of kind of avoid that fate.
They pull it out the bag.
They do pull it out the bag, and I don't really know where they're going or what the intention is with the side. Like, I don't understand the club's vision for this team, because it feels quite sort of not completely hands off, but a little bit dismissive, and like they're happy as long as things are just ticking along. And that is like standing still isn't good enough in this league anymore, and that's what I worry about for them.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Perhaps if there is this 49% stake that Monarch Collective get, things might change a little bit, but there's still lots and lots of question marks for sure. Tim, unfortunately, you have the meh game of the weekend to analyse. What can you do with Brighton, Aston Villa? First goalless draw of the season in Crawley.
Yeah, I mean, I actually watched the West Ham Spurs game as live, but honestly, I don't have a lot to say about it. It's 90 minutes of my life I won't get back. But obviously for this game, I was on Ajimang watch a little bit, and obviously they've given her the number 9 shirt this season. They started her, so you can see that this is her second loan spell here, but it looks like she's going to get more starts, more game time. And she had a really good performance. She had kind of 3 shots, 5 shot creating actions, but only 64% passing accuracy. So I think you can see some of the things that Arsenal want to tighten up in her game. But I think what we saw in this game, this was 5th against 6th in last season's WSL, and that's kind of what it looked like. It looked like 2 good mid-table teams who are both well coached. I think, Aston Villa's manager now has had a pre-season, but we saw the same system as last season. What I saw in this game was 2 pretty well coached, good, strong mid-table teams, but both of whom probably just lack that really star quality to break open a game like this. And to be honest, this and Spurs v West Ham were quite similar games. It just felt like, I feel like West Ham actually do have the quality to break open a game like this. But yeah, it looked, if you were a coach watching this, you'd say, yeah, 2 nicely structured teams, but just not quite that real kind of spark to really bring a game to life.
Tim, I'm just curious, were you quite excited about watching Michelle Ajimang? Like, I didn't catch much of that game, but I'm quite excited to see her throughout the season, especially with the hype that she had from Euros. But I think she'd make a really good, consistent player for Brighton.
Absolutely, and I think that's what Arsenal really want. I think what we saw for England in the summer, just the perfect Plan B player. You know, England used to put Millie Bright up front, so it makes more sense to have Michelle Agyemang to kind of put up front, and she was in that, you know, that like kitchen sink role a little bit, crashing the box. But obviously, there's more to the player than that, I think, and I think that's what Arsenal want to build out. They want to build out a player who can start games, influence games for the whole 90 minutes. I think you saw in this game when she faces the goal and she faces an opponent, she's very, very difficult to stop. Very difficult to stop indeed. But, you know, she just needs to tidy up like a few kind of technical fundamentals, I guess. But I think she's going to be a hell of a player. I think she was very unlucky not to score in this game. I think she's going to score plenty of goals in the WSL this season.
I really love that she is being able to sort of settle into WSL football a little bit out of the Arsenal spotlight. I think that's really beneficial. I think it's a really smart move. I wrote in one of my preview things, I wrote somewhere that it's not necessarily like, if you're an Arsenal fan, what you want to see is like a really talented player go out on loan, and there may be times in the season where fans go, oh God, but if we had Michelle, we would have been all right in that moment. Like, we would have had a player to come on where we didn't, and that kind of thing, if injuries take hold and stuff. Whereas this time out, like I feel like you've prioritised the like long-term development of the player and what's important for that over necessarily sort of like potential immediate demands in the heat of a moment if things aren't going quite right, which I think is like really significant and speaks to like the quality of Arsenal's attention to detail at that academy sort of developmental level.
Yeah, and also Stina Blackstenius' contract, I think, is up at the end of the season, so that creates a much more natural time, I think. But in this game as well, Aston Villa have switched to a back three, so she's kind of up against three centre halves. Another thing that I think will really benefit her, though, is playing with someone like Frank Kirby, for example. And I just think with Villa in this game, you can kind of see that their big goal scorer has been Rachel Daly for quite a long time, and she's playing a slightly different role in the system, slightly more withdrawn, but perhaps she doesn't quite have the same goal scoring prowess that she had maybe 2 seasons ago. And I feel like Aston Villa kind of need that player. I think Agyemang can be that player for Brighton, but if we're talking about game breakers, 2 seasons ago, Villa might have won this with a goal from Rachel Daly, and it feels like that might happen less and less as time draws on.
Yeah, she is an absolute superstar, isn't she? The bright spark, if you like, of what was a very ultimately dull game. No more 0-0s, please, this season. That would be nice. Now, listen, we have kind of touched on many of the deadline day signings. We talked about the Lioness Manchester switch with Grace Clinton moving from United to City, Jess Park heading the other way, Alyssa Thompson and her £1.1 million move from Angel City to Chelsea, Grace Gaioro's £1.4 million move to London City Lionesses from PSG. That's one hell of a statement. And Ji So-yeon is back in England as well. She's joined Birmingham City on a short-term loan from Seattle Reign. There's some of the standout stories. What caught your eye the most, Suzy?
Oh, God. I mean, all of those that you've listed. Grace Gioro is obviously the big one with, that move to London City. Like, what's interesting is Michelle Kang's not only got a really, really top quality striker into London City, she's also weakened a rival in France as well, because she's owner of Lyon too. So taking her from PSG is a like doubly shrewd move for her. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this sort of multi-club ownership model plays out, because I think we're probably going to see quite a bit more of that. And I think, what conversations are happening by the scenes about, well, if things don't work out in London City, you can go to one of these other clubs that I've got under my belt, because it's not the most attractive prospect necessarily, like a developing team that's just been promoted. So, yeah, I think the multi-club ownership and the huge money being invested is playing a big role. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking of like opening weekend, obviously it's Olivia Smith, who looks like the signing of the summer so far, but it's a bit early days to be drawing any conclusions, isn't it, after one game?
Yeah, I think so. Any other summer business that stood out to you, Fadumo? Who had the best window, in your opinion?
Oh, I don't know about best window, but I would say probably who I was excited with just from the opening game was Ellie Carpenter. I think she had a great game. Yeah, top signing, her and Olivia Smith. I think were definitely the top two that delivered in the opening weekend for sure.
Tim?
Yeah, I'd take this from a slightly different angle, actually, around deadline day and everything. And actually, I think what kind of really stuck out to me is that on deadline day itself, we didn't have too many surprise stories because most of them broke the day before deadline day. And actually, the quality of the transfer reporting, and Tom Gary of this parish, very responsible for a lot of that. Like we're just knowing about things so much more quickly now. So actually, it felt like the day before deadline day kind of felt like deadline day because that was when Alyssa Thompson broke. We got the Grace Guerrero story. We got the Clinton Park swap. All of that kind of unfolded, or at least in a reporting sense, unfolded the day before. And it's something I certainly feel. As well, that it's getting. If I think of myself competing with other reporters, it's getting more competitive. Mr. Gary beat me to the Olivia Smith story by a couple of hours this summer. So I just think
we don't compete with each other on this pod, Tim.
No. The story was accurate and it was out there. That was the most important thing. But I just think the quality of the reporting and the resource that's going into it is just getting so much better now. I think that's my kind of real takeaway from this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And I have to say, I'm just going to wrap up some of the round 3 of Champions League qualification, which gets underway on Thursday. I mentioned Manchester United face SK Brann in the first leg. They're travelling to Bergen for that one. There's also BK Häcken Atletico and Eintracht Frankfurt Real Madrid, which sound very exciting. And qualification for the new Europa Cup kicks off on Wednesday as well. SWPL side Hibernian are travelling to Italy to face Inter Milan, while Glasgow City host Irish champions Athlone Town. Hopefully I have pronounced that correctly. It's been a pleasure hearing from you as always, Tim. Thank you.
My pleasure as always. Thanks for having me.
Fadumo, brilliant debut. I hope you enjoyed yourself and you'll come back.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.
Suzy Wrack, always a delight to be in your company for an hour, no matter the time of the morning.
I'd rather later, to be honest.
Well, I'm an hour ahead, so I kind of did get a mini lie-in, so yay me. Right, keep having your say. Send in your questions via X or email us at womensfootballweekly@theguardian.com. And as ever, a reminder to sign up for our bi-weekly women's football newsletter. All you need to do is search Moving the Goalposts sign up. The Guardian Women's Football Weekly is produced by Sophie Downey and Silas Gray. Music composition was by Laura Iredale. Our executive producer is Danielle Stevens.
This is The Guardian.